this episode of the Disability and podcast, we are joined by a lady whose accolades and achievements speak for themselves. Her credentials include being a senior lecturer in disability studies at Liverpool Hope University's Centre for Culture and Disability Studies since 2014, after completing her PhD at Newcastle University in the same year. She has published many research articles and 3 books that explore the socio-spatial and socio-cultural understanding of dwarfism, including the title Midgetism, the Exploitation and Discrimination of People with Dwarfism. She is also an executive editor for the Disability and Society Journal. In 2022, she successfully campaigned for Marks and Spencer to change the name of a sweet that used the derogatory M word, which is offensive towards people with dwarfism, to Little Gems, despite facing a public backlash. She has also written for many publications, including The Mighty, The Metro, The Big Issue, and The Huffington Post. She has been featured on podcasts and radio, such as Always Looking Up and the BBC, and was part of the panel on disability representation in Future Stories by Southwest in 2023 in the US. More recently, she has been a consultant to Walt Disney Productions regarding dwarfism representation for a major movie. She is a trustee of the award-winning arts organisation Dada in Liverpool. Her most recent campaign against the chain Green King saw over 1,000 people sign her petition to rename one of their pubs from the offensive N-word. In her latest work, one contributor, Sam Drummond, states that people with dwarfism are talked about, written about, and portrayed, but too rarely are we given a pen or microphone. In this episode, we discuss how our guest has given leading practitioners within the community the opportunity to exercise their pens for her latest book, Dwarfism, Art and Advocacy, Creating Our Own Positive Identity. It is my absolute pleasure to give a very warm welcome to Dr. Erin Pritchard. Welcome.
Hi, Steph. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction.
Thank you for joining us today, Erin. And we're going to talk about your new book, Dwarfism, Art and Advocacy, which has got a fantastic cover of a burning circus tent, which I think, for those in the dwarfism community, probably speaks for itself. But for those who are not necessarily aware of the connotation or the meaning behind the front cover, would you just like to explain a little bit?
So everybody sort of connects people with dwarfism to the circus. You know, that's where we were seen. That's where we were portrayed. To the extent that even doctors, when parents have a child with dwarfism, will tell them, you've got a circus child. This kid will work in a circus. You know, my mother was even asked that when I was about 7 years old. And basically, the setting it on fire, it's advocating against this. We're showing people we don't want this. It's a form of anarchy against the circus and telling people where you can shove it, basically.
So the aim of the book is to challenge problematic stereotypes and attitudes associated with dwarfism in the arts and media. So how does the book set out that to achieve that aim?
Well, it starts by giving a voice, a collective voice, to some amazing artists, activists, actors. You know, we work in all sorts of forms of entertainment and media who have dwarfism, but do not partake in any sort of derogatory forms of entertainment that people sort of assume we all work in, like panto or, you know, circus or as Snow White's 7 dwarfs, because they think that's a job for us and that's all we can do. So it's really about challenging that. And so by giving a voice, not just to myself, but to so many people with dwarfism, it's saying, look, it's not just me talking here. There's so many others.
But I was wondering, you know, whether a particular set of themes that you wanted to discuss in the book that you had in mind from the beginning? Like, how did you decide who would be involved as well?
Well, the sort of themes I wanted was sort of cultural representations of dwarfism and how they're being challenged. So these new sort of cultural representations, not relying on the old. I wanted awareness raising, basically. I wanted this advocacy, which we don't see in the dwarfism community a lot. I wanted advocacy to be a main theme and show that people with dwarfism can be activists, but we need a collective advocacy. And I wanted to give that dwarf pride and voice, because I think there's so much voice in this, and that's the important thing, because our voices get drowned out. They get drowned out by average-sized people who, and Professor David Bolter says, this assumed authority where people talk on our behalf and go, that's not offensive to you whatsoever. And it's like, oh, I didn't realise you followed me getting this. And I wanted what you mentioned and a couple of others is that dwarf pride. It's the dwarf pride that we have. We can't have pride being thrown across a room, or we can't have pride being in, one of Santa's little elves or Snow White's little helpers. But we can have pride in the things that everyone here does. And so you said, how did I choose these writers? They're writers that I have a lot of respect for and a lot of pride in that I've seen, and they've given me dwarf pride. Because as you're probably aware, Steph, when you are growing up, and you were probably one of the only people with dwarfism in your community, and you see these representations on TV, in film, and whatever, you don't feel some dwarf pride all the time. But when I, read about people like you, saw your work, I was filled with immense pride. So those are the people I chose, and sort of going around trying to put it on social media and seeing who, but knowing quite a few people already, such as yourself and a few others, I was like, these are just great people, and I want their voice in this collective.
When did that first spark or the first idea of it, like, let's get these collective of people together into a book? Like, how did you approach people?
I sort of knew quite a few people already on social media. And so I was like, you know what, I'm seeing similarities between them and them, in different groups. And I thought, we're singing from the same hymn sheet, but we don't know each other. We're very disfractured. And so I thought, how can we bring all those people together into one book? And that's what I wanted to do. So I started contacting people with these similar kind of views and commitments and activism. But one of the things was, I realised, because I'm also, like you say, disability arts, and in my work, I've got big connections with disability art groups. And I was like, there's no dwarfs there. There's no people with dwarfism, or there is, but they're very much on the sideline. And I think even with conversations with yourself, when, we've felt this, that we've been marginalised in disability art. So it's like, how do we bring us into disability art and beyond? That's what I wanted to do.
But do you think that's because dwarf people have not had that input or development within arts and culture? And there's also an inherent mistrust because of the way we have been treated historically. What do you think about that?
I think there's also a hierarchy of disability. So I think we've been very much excluded because people, even disabled people, would say, you're not disabled. And I think you said that in your chapter, and I think Tam Reynolds also mentioned it in their chapter. We grow up being told you're not disabled, you're just small. But of course, through the social model, we are very much disabled. A lot of people with dwarfism, they do feel excluded, and they're scared of getting into entertainment, because entertainment or any sort of art automatically goes, you can believe one of Snow White's 7 little helpers. So even in disability, and I think there's also this sort of thing with disability, it's not seen, it's very stigmatized. So people don't want to necessarily be involved in that. And I mean, before the social model, before I learned about that, I was just like, what have I got to do with disability? I'm not represented there. It's always a wheelchair user. It's always a person with Down syndrome. There is no person with dwarfism in these representations. So I feel like, where do I belong in that?
To add to that, historically, the dwarf body has been objectified within, especially paintings, for instance. I guess, really, that's the point of reference that our community is coming from. So there's never been that investment in developing artistically, and like, as you say, it's very fragmented. How far do you think the book has gone in addressing frustrations with the lack of representation of dwarfism in disability art?
I think it's helped to bring together a collective voice, and that's harder to deny. When you've got this collective voice, it has exposed disability hierarchies, it is exposed stereotypes, and even if we've got slightly differing opinions, it's exposed that we do not tolerate stereotypes of dwarfism, that we are not akin to going, oh yes, please, I'd be more than happy to play one of Snow White's 7 little helpers. Oh, I can't wait. It's exposed that actually most people turn around and go, whoa, no way am I touching that with a barge pole. Danny Woodford now talks about how producers and creators and writers have shown very ableist attitudes when they say, oh no, we can't have a dwarf playing a doctor on ER. And he's turned around and said, but there's plenty of doctors with dwarfism, like, Dr. Michael Lane. And they've still said no. So next time somebody says it's a job for us, I'd like them to consider that and go, well, this is a job for us. So I think it's challenging those experiences, those real life experiences that can be quite shocking sometimes to the average reader of this book to go, wow, okay, so this has given it a new dimension.
Yeah, I think you're right there because, I think predominantly from experience within the dwarfism community, there's a very strong charitable awareness and educating arm to it. So you've got the charity side, you've got the sports side, that's quite developed. But you've got nothing but arts and culture or arts and advocacy. What do you think the actual differences are between the awareness raising and this, like, the arts and advocacy? What is the difference that you're trying to portray in this book?
I think the awareness raising is really poor. There is very little awareness raising. We had Dwarfism Awareness Month last month, and like I wrote in Rooted in Rights, it's mostly just somebody showing a trident hand or mentioning that there's over 400 different types of dwarfism. That might be awareness, but it doesn't change anything. Whereas art and advocacy can be very powerful, very shocking. And when you have a shock value, people listen. So, Tam Reynolds does that in their work when they write this poem, this really problematic poem. And I think it's very powerful when they are in drag as Mijit Bardot, reclaiming that slur. This gets people listening, and it's entertaining without being, oh, look at the dwarf. The dwarf body's very entertaining. Let's point and laugh at it. Their artwork is very entertaining. It's like your artwork. It's very participatory. So when you did the photography, your Just Little exhibition, you've got those average size audiences to sort of look at these images and look at them from our height. And that gets them questioning, because if you go to just a random group of people, dwarfism awareness, we can't reach things. People go, oh yeah, bless. But when you have to put them in that position, it's a lot more powerful. And I think art is a very powerful tool for advocacy because it engages people. And even if you're just watching a film where a person with dwarfism is playing just an everyday role, like a teacher or, as Danny Woodburn said, a judge on some show, or like, people go, oh, right, okay, yeah, why not in this show? Why can't a person with dwarfism play a judge? He's educated.
I think the book points towards some changes for the better in addressing issues of representation. It seems that much of the change is coming from the US. Thinking of the book's inclusion of discussion of by actors and activists like Danny Woodburn, Nick Nabucki, and Amanda Katya. Do you think it's significant that it's predominantly US based?
Well, it's a very Western-based book, so there are voices from Australia and the UK, a lot of voices from the US, but that's predominantly got the much larger population than any other country in this book. And I think you also have to think about, it's Hollywood, isn't it? And that's where people with dwarfism are portrayed very problematically. But also they have things like midget wrestling and midget tossing. And okay, midget tossing originated in Australia, but Angela Van Etten, who is, I think, from New Zealand, worked for LPA, Little People of America, and was a strong advocate to get rid of midget tossing in various states in the US. But as we can see now in the US, you have Donald Trump back in power, and one of his team members advocates or supports midget tossing, which is a no surprise, really. I mean, she works for a tosser, doesn't she? So you've got all these sort of significant problems. The freak show originated in like the US and the UK with eugenics. So of course, this is the best place then to have these advocates that are going against those things.
So how are you hoping that the book will be received?
Positively, I hope. I hope disabled arts, industries and stuff will learn from it and provide a space for people with dwarfism who will go, actually, you know what? Yeah, they do belong here. There is something unique that they can bring. But I also hope that it surprises people, but makes them change their mind. And I know that's very difficult because I know from my own campaigns, it's very difficult to change people's minds because they're very stubborn. And even if they try and say they're open-minded and I'm not racist, I'm not this, but they're very much like, you know, I've been very much educated on mansplain that midget is an offensive term, even though it's screamed at me. And I know yourself have experienced it by people in the street. You go, midget. And it's like, you know, people don't see that. So these are the things I want people to see and go, okay. It'd be great if sort of, you know, because I've worked with producers and stuff, but more the film industry could see this, or TV industry could see this and go, well, you know what? Maybe we can start treating people with dwarfism as human beings. That would be a good start, wouldn't it? You know, and instead of playthings.
It'd be wonderful. I think one of the things that I mentioned in my chapter was how we are in the room as these gatekeepers, but we're not necessarily at the desk. We're not the one making decisions, and, you know, hopefully that your book will actually pave the way to enable that.
What this book does is show that there are about 13 contributors, I think, who are very competent, very intelligent. They very much challenge the stereotype of dwarves. You know, if you're going to hire yourself out to be some little novelty, to be chained to someone for their stag do, if you're going to be an Oompa Loompa and just dance around, and of course people aren't going to see you as very intelligent, are they? But when you give people these voices and they come across as so competent, so intelligent, so articulate, then it's hoped that, yeah, let's bring them to the table. They're not charity cases. These are, well, you know, our equals. And I know that's difficult because people don't like to see people who are shorter as equal. They don't see people who are short as competent. But here we are, you know, and that's the discussions that they should be having with us. And you're very much right. We should be at the table contributing.
One of the things that comes across in the book is that all of the contributors, as well as yourself, like everyone's faced like discrimination, prejudice and ignorance, either within or outside of the dwarfism community. Yet each one of us has actually turned that lived experience into something, I don't want to say positive, but we've tried to change the world for the better, or our particular spheres of world for the better. And I was just wondering what themes came out of the book for yourself.
Certainly a dwarf pride came out. And I think that's something we've been searching for years and never had. And now we have it. Other themes were discrimination in the entertainment industry, whether that is through like physical access, and that opened my eyes to sort of why they don't cast disabled people. Prejudiced attitudes, very open prejudice that you probably won't get away with other people. You know, like, oh, we can't do that. No, you can't play a doctor. And it's like, what? I think very self-advocate, those, you know, this advocacy that we've never really noticed on dwarfism communities because we've just been oppressed for so long, silent. And I think people have been, you know, embodied that and just gone, yeah, there's no point shouting out about this. I think there is. And I also think one of the really interesting things was comedy, because even though we are very much stereotyped as these comical figures, a lot of these advocacy in here sort of turn that on its head and go, no, we're not comic figures. We can be in comedy by all means, but we're not the comic figure. Another theme was this notion, like it's quite a hot topic at the moment, which is about height altering treatments. And there was a couple of people that wrote about that said, whilst they'd had it done, the reasons for that, they still were very critical of it. Like Emily Sullivan Sanford and Tam Reynolds, they were very critical of it in that they had it done, Emily's definitely her choice, but it was still like, I've had to get this done because of the abuse of society, because to be accepted in society, I have to change. Well, I don't want people to have to change. If they want to get it done, that's fine. But we should be accepted for who we are and have that pride of who we are.
So was there any particular standout chapters, like for yourself?
I just was blown away by all the chapters. I loved them all. Alice Lambert, because it was so strong. Like she was very open and said, yeah, I've done panto and I regret it. And she exposed what it's like to really be in panto. And it's not the happy little beings that people think we are. Like she pointed out herself, you're not professionals, you're not actors, you're suit fillers. You sneeze or you yawn and that's it. You're not acting. People are there to see the dwarf body and they are amused by the dwarf body. It's like this freak show treat that you can get if you go and watch Snow White in the panto. Danny Woodburns, because he's worked in the industry of, in acting in Hollywood, as in Seinfeld, and he gave us that insight into it that, I could write about, but I haven't got the insight. So, working with some great producers, working with some horrible producers, working with Angela Lansbury. So I was like, that's definitely brilliant, because I was like, I love her. Yours, because it was just obviously talking about this brilliant art exhibition that I wanted people to know of the photography, the work you do, and fostering dwarf pride. And of course, Tam Reynolds, because I was like, wow, this person, Majid Bardot, it's like so controversial in some ways, but also I loved the way that they spoke about how drag spaces or queer space is more accommodating to them than disability spaces, disabled spaces. They feel more included. They feel more at home because they are accepted there as a person with dwarfism, as well as somebody who is part of the LGBTQ community. So those were some standout chapters, but I think every one of them has its own merit and strength and will, really make its mark.
Who do you think the audience for the book is?
I think it was everyone, because given that with the Snow White stuff, everybody's like an expert on dwarfism without ever meeting a person with dwarfism, without having dwarfism. But I've learned, with this recent campaign of getting rid of the name midget from a pub, people say, no, it's not offensive. It's not offensive to people with dwarfism. And I'm like, all right, well, that's lovely. Once again, I'm getting told by an average-sized person it's not offensive. And I think they need to read these. I don't think they will, but those are the kind of people that need to read it, see those struggles. Anybody who ever says that panto or any sort of derogatory entertainment is a job for us needs to read this book, because what it shows is it's not a job for us. We are more capable of that. TV, film producers need to read it. But like what you said yourself, you wish when in your 20s or 30s, you had read it. And I wish I had had a book like this when I was sort of in my 20s, to say, wow, we're more capable of this. Drama teachers, a lot. They all need to read it.
I honestly think it's like, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but it's like a seminal book on dwarfism and changing the conversation around what dwarfism is, how we need to be represented. I think what our role is, yes, in disability arts, but also the wider world, and like what tables, like highlighting what tables we're actually missing at. Because even though we have better representation, say with the likes of Sinead Burke and Ellie Simmons, how many people are still, ordinary people with dwarfism, are still getting a huge amount of abuse on the street? And also what opportunities are actually artistic and advocacy opportunities are there to be able to develop our voices as well, to be able to state clearly what our needs are and what rights we need.
Just to add to that, like I think associations of people with dwarfism should read this, but my previous books are very academic based. They still have advocacy in them, but they're very academic. They're gathering dust in an academic library. Whereas this one, I purposely did it so that it's not just academic, but it's for the public as well. And that's why I wanted a lot of people with dwarfism writing that, because it comes from a more engaging sort of voice. It's not all this academic jargon. And that's what I wanted people, because it's for everyone, this book. It's not just for academics. It's definitely going on the reading list here. Of course, none of the students will read it, but it's still on the reading list. How you can make true change is by having more society reading it.
As the editor, how did you find the process of pulling this book together?
Like any edited book, it could be frustrating at times, because it was very different to editing an academic book, because I realized a lot of the contributors, who I'm very grateful to, had other commitments, of course. It was very difficult in that sense, but it was so empowering reading the contributions, these chapters. It was frustrating at times, because to hear some of those horrible stories that they share and go, this isn't right. When some producers say, no, a dwarf cannot play a doctor, it's like, oh my God, you just want to go there and smack him. It was so empowering to me, because sometimes in academia, when I've led campaigns, even if they've been successful, the abuse I've got of everyday people, who then seem to forget about it and go and abuse, the next minority group the week later, whichever one the Daily Mail's telling them to get abusive towards that week. It was just so fantastic to read those chapters, and so strengthening, if that's weird. It just, I just felt, oh wow, because for years I've just felt, where is this community for people with dwarfism? Where's the activism? You've had some associations going for decades, and there's been very little change. And so you just feel really disheartened. But when you find all this collective, and it's one after the other going, I've done this, and I believe in this, and this is what we need to, it's like, wow, this is what we need. And I hope that's when people read each chapter, they go, yes, it's not just me. And there's some amazing advocates there. But they might be in Australia, they might be in the US, they might be in Germany, they might be in the UK, Sunderland or London, but they're there.
How will you know that the book has been a success? How do you measure that yourself and for the community?
I think it's very difficult, because whenever I've got books, I never know if they're being sold or what. But I then have people emailing me about my book and go, oh, we've been using this in our syllabus. We've been using this. If I'm at a conference, I go, oh, I've been using your book. I'm like, really? Well, you got a loose table or something? And then, no, we've been using it in class, and it's great. And I think that's one of the ways. And I think it's just about sharing it and people talking about it, keeping those conversations going. It's so hard to measure impact sometimes, but just that if people are engaging with it. And I think just it's a success just having it published, as far as I'm concerned. The feedback and response we got from Emerald when I put this proposal through, they were like, yes, this is what we're looking for. And so that's been an achievement.
How do you think the book will build on Dwarfism Pride and its contribution to disability art?
Well, I think we're putting our voice in there, aren't we? And we're putting this as putting on the bookshelf alongside other disability art books. Disability art books that I've been looking through and going, okay, there's, a wheelchair use, or this person with mobility and parents that dances, great. And this person with Down syndrome that dances and does this. Or, this comedian who's got cerebral palsy, brilliant. Okay, where's the dwarfs? With the biggest, sort of cultural representation of disability, we're in every, cultural representation. Where are we in disability arts? We're not. So this book is to go alongside those ones and to be used by disability arts and stuff in the dwarfism communities to show you're not alone. There's this collective voice. It's not just one or two people going, like everybody goes on about Peter Dinklage being fantastic, And, he is, but not everyone can become Peter Dinklage. Okay, because not everybody can become an amazing actor like Alan Rickman or Gene Wilder or any of those. So, but he's put himself there. He's managed to get there, but we all know that's not always achievable. So there's others. There's loads of others out there. Okay, you don't have to be a suit filler, as Alice Lambert says, but you have to work hard at it. You have to work hard at your profession. You cannot just expect it. Like, lots of people with dwarfism go into entertainment expecting a role because they're dwarfs. No, you expect a role because you're talented and work hard, but even then you're not going to get it, unless you're somebody, a nepo baby. So what this does is say, we've all worked hard and we've all met barriers and we've all experienced these barriers, but you've got to keep at them. You've got to keep pushing through. And you can, all these artists here are successful, but it doesn't mean that they haven't have obstacles or have to push against things that have made them feel uncomfortable. They haven't just gone, okay, right, I'll put on this suit and their job done. They've said no. And I think that's what we need to do, is have a voice and not be submissive.
You're right. I think there's an element of you've got to learn your craft, just like anybody, whether you've got dwarfism or not, you've got to learn your craft. But then for us, it's mixed with, or we have running alongside, is the prejudice and the discrimination to prove that we are capable of our craft. And as people with dwarfism, it can be really difficult to untangle what is discrimination and prejudice and what is actually constructive criticism. And how do you think your book differentiates between the two or shows that?
Shows, like in certain chapters, like Nick Vicky's or Danny Woodburn's or something, that there are difficulties just getting any acting profession. You're going to get meet barriers, but it's then, and sometimes you just meet ignorance, and you've just got to challenge that in a very productive way. There is absolute discrimination that they experience, but then there is this thing, well, that the role wasn't for you, but go and talk to people and keep at it, keep chipping away, keep pushing. And because that's the only way you can ever get somewhere. You can't just go, okay, I'll just take the easy route here. And I think, even Danny Woodburn and all that acknowledge that it is difficult for people with dwarfism. And so, of course, then they end up in doing the very derogatory roles. And they don't blame them for that. But if we want producers and writers and all that to see us as more than a suit filler, we need to say no. And that can be difficult. I am aware of that. I'm aware of some people's financial circumstances which might, might sort of force them into that. But I think overall we have to be very strong. If we want change, we have to enact it ourselves. We cannot wait for it to come along. We cannot wait for others to do it. We have to be a collective.
Do you think that's actually possible right now in the dwarfism community?
I think it's possible at any time, and I don't think there's any right time to do it. I mean, right now it's a horrible climate to be in, but I think the more voices, the better. I mean, you never have this perfect opportunity, do you? I mean, the civil rights movements and all that, those happened at some horrible time, okay? People just didn't wake up and go, you know what, let's not be racist anymore. And then, African Americans go, okay, this is our time to shine. They had to just take any opportunity and push for it. Same with the disability community in general, when they were fighting for disability access rights in the 60s and 70s. People were very against that. Like, they met some horrible attitudes like UCLA saying, we don't get people like you studying here. Well, no, of course not, because you'd never let us. And so that's when the Rolling Quads had to say, no, tough, we're fighting for this, we're coming onto your space. So I just think now is a better time than any, because the sooner the better. I think we've left it way too long.
Do you think it's possible for people within the wider dwarfism community to get behind that? Because of the division between those who are for entertainment and who are.
I think this is a book that could help us get behind it. Those who are for derogatory entertainment, they're always going to sort of either because they've always been given more of a voice, even within the dwarfism community, than we have. And so I think it's about time that those tables were turned. So I do think that it is difficult, but now we should be doing it. It's not ostracizing them, but just trying to educate and find ways of then including them and being inclusive. But I think now is as good a time as any.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So, will it be a sequel?
I'd like to hope so. I mean, I had this wonderful conversation today with Sophie Turner, who's based in the Netherlands, who does this film, Dwarfism Advocacy. I'm like, wow, why didn't I know about you last year? You know, because there's so many more great people, and I'd hope that, because people have said to me, well, why isn't I included in the book? Well, I didn't know you. Okay, I put the call out. That's all I can do. And so there's other people that just keep springing to mind, and I'd love to hope that they would want to be part of this, another book, a sequel. It'd be great. The more voices, the better.
And so, what are the plans in the future?
Currently, I'm working on another book on dwarfism in TV and film, and so writing a critical analysis of those, from fantasy to like just everyday sitcoms, comedy, anything like that. So the Wizard of Oz and all those, and even the newest film Wonka, which I watched and thought it's a very complex. There's lots of criticisms, but I think it's more complex. I'm also just had a very successful campaign of getting a pub to drop the name Midget and be called the Roaring Raindrop. But currently there's people backlash against that, people who never experienced hate crime or hate speech, I should say, disabled hate speech, who need to really recognize their own privileges and their very privileged life of being able to go down the streets and not have a midget screamed at them, be called a midget, or be told that they can't do this because they're a midget, or be asked for a photograph because they're a midget. So I think that's my newest work, and so I'm hoping other people get behind that. But again, we need that collective in the community, because there's so few of us, and unfortunately in the current climate there's a lot more bigots out there who feel the need to share their voice.
To finish, what would be your rallying cry to encourage people from the dwarfism community and from disability art and the wider communities to encourage dwarfism to be included at the table?
Because we're stronger as a group, and we're stronger together, and people in the disability community, we experience similar discrimination, whether it's the physical barriers, social barriers, the cultural representations. We all have those similarities, and we will support you and you support us, and we're stronger together in that way. Now, and the overall establishment and all that wants to fracture these communities, because divide and conquer. So we need to come together and we need to fight together. And dwarfism, when people with dwarfism would make a valuable contribution to disability art, and disability arts could be a very valuable ally to us. And so we need to work together.
Thank you, Erin. And for people who want to be able to read your book, where can they find it? Where can they buy it?
It's currently on the Emerald Publishing website, so Emerald Publishers. It can be bought as an ebook or hardback. There is a discount, I think it's EME 30. And of course, I think the major bookshops, I don't want to encourage Amazon, but Amazon does sell it, but I would go to the publisher first. But yeah, I think hopefully any good bookstore. I think I saw it on W. Smith's of all places as well.
How does it feel when you see your book out in the wild?
It's always great. The first one I was like, wow, this is amazing. It's actually being sold. And then but this one, I'm like, wow, because of the strong cover. And I think going back to that cover, the circus tent, it's like the phoenix, isn't it? It's rising from the ashes. So let's burn the circus, put it in the past, and rise with some much better representation that is owned by us and not created by the average sized person who gets to go, this is what you should be recognized as because you need to be lower and unequal to us. No, we're creating a representation that puts us on an equal footing with the rest of society. That's what I wanted to do.
Well, thank you very much, Erin. I think that's a perfect place to finish. Thank you for the interview today. with the Disability and podcast, and best of luck with the future work and the book.
Thank you, Steph. And obviously, I just want to keep hearing about your work and having platforms for that and seeing more of it. And hopefully, the disability art community will maybe take more notice of fantastic artists such as yourself.
Thanks so much, Erin.